As you know, I try and make a lot of my videos a learning resource. Here's how it'll work. In the video, I'll ask a question and you'll see that in blue text, followed by a pause icon. That simply means when you see the pause icon, pause the video. Think about that question, come to your answer, discuss it if there's a few of you, and then simply resume the video. Now you may see multiple questions, you may see other diagrams, illustrations, even videos inserted. But whenever you see a question in blue text followed by the pause icon, pause the video.
Today we're working on a 2000 Nissan Xterra 3.3 engine. The complaint is that it runs bad. Most of the time it is intermittent, sometimes it'll actually run okay. Now in diagnosing car problems, once in a while it's as simple as just opening the hood, look around a little bit and you can see the problem. But most of the time that's not the case. We actually have to go hunting for the problem. It's similar to looking for buried treasure. If you were on the beach and someone told you there was buried treasure out there in the sand, you could take a stick and start poking it down in the sand until you hit something. And then you can scrape the sand away and see if that's the buried treasure. It may just be a rock or a stick. If that's the case, then you just keep on looking until you hit something, you scrape the sand away, and there's the buried treasure. So what we need to do is actually start looking at things and trying to find that buried treasure or the problem. Now when we're digging around in the sand trying to find the buried treasure, we may find some things along the way that may not be the big problem, and in this case with the codes. So we're poking around in the sand. Got a knock sensor problem, we've got a map sensor problem, we've got a cat problem. We've got a code P0325 for a knock sensor. Actually at this point I'm going to disregard that. I'm not going to totally just cast it off, but it's going to be like poking down in the sand and I found something but it's not the buried treasure. The reason is it's missing pretty bad, and that actually can detonate a false knock sensor code. So what do we need? Evidence. Let's see what we can find. Now what I like to do in trying to find the problem is take the most serious potential problem first and either rule it in and confirm it or rule it out. In this case it'd be the catalytic converter. If the cat is restricted and plugged up, be putting a whole lot of back pressure on that engine, can cause it to misfire, run bad, several different things. So what we need to do is find if the cat is the problem or not. There are several ways to diagnose a catalytic converter problem. Some are a little bit more complex than others. But probably the simplest way, the quickest way to find out whether or not you've got a cat problem and actually look a little deeper, or whether or not the cat's any kind of a problem at all, is just simply to do a vacuum test. Now you know an engine is basically just an air pump, which means vacuum. So if you hook up a vacuum gauge and we've got it directly hooked up to direct intake vacuum, then when we start the car we can actually see what the vacuum is going to do. Now what are we looking for in the vacuum gauge? Remember, the engine is basically an air pump. It sucks in air and it pushes it out the exhaust. So if the catalytic converter is plugged up or restricted, either partially or fully, it's not going to let it vent that air. You're not going to have a good reading on your vacuum gauge. So let's start the engine and see what we have. Now what you basically want to do is just to snap throttle. We're reading about 18 pounds right now, and we snap the throttle. Okay, hold it down. Now you can see what was happening. We were about 18, 19 pounds when we snapped the throttle. We went all the way down, snapped the throttle again, and then when we actually kept the throttle down, we stayed down. That means that engine is sucking that air in and pushing it out just fine. There's no restriction in the catalytic converter. Now here's another thing to watch. Start the engine. Here's a very important part. Our engine vacuum is steady. That needle is not sitting here wobbling back and forth. which is the case when you could possibly have a burnt valve or some type of a timing issue or something like that. But we've got about 18-19 pounds of steady vacuum, and when you hit the throttle and bring it down like that, that vacuum is doing exactly what it should be. It's being sucked in and pushed out fine, so we do not need to go looking further at a catalytic converter problem. One of the things we noticed when we were looking for problems, when we were actually poking around in the sand to see what we can discover, we noticed there was a clear and distinct exhaust leak. But it was a little bit hard to pinpoint exactly where it was just with our ears. So we actually used this device here where you can put it on and listen, and then you can put your probe around and it intensifies the sound. We're actually able to locate where it was the most intense, and it was right down in this area, and there's a little bolt that goes through the shield on the catalytic converter, and that bolt was actually missing. So it was just a wide open direct air inlet into the catalytic converter that shouldn't have been there. Here's where it's at. Now here's the bolt. You can see the bolt head. Look at the screwdriver tip pointing at it. And as we zoom out, you can actually see where it's located. Now that bolt was actually missing. We've got a new bolt in it now. And that could have directly been part of the cause for those catalytic converter codes. Now we've got the exhaust leak fixed, but we still have our engine miss.